Are you serious? You're paying in nickels and dimes. That was the waitress, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. The room went quiet. You could hear every coin hit the counter as he counted, slowly, carefully, with hands that had clearly seen years of hard work and war. Nobody said a word. But then, someone stood up from a back booth. And what they did next? It shut down the entire diner. Cold silence, stunned faces, and a lesson nobody in that room would forget. If you believe every act of service deserves dignity, comment respect. Every Thursday at exactly 7:15 a.m., he arrived. Rain, snow, or sun, it didn't matter. Leonard Mays, 84 years old, limped across the uneven sidewalk and pushed open the smudged glass door of Shelby's diner like clockwork. The bell above the door never startled him anymore. It was part of the rhythm, part of the ritual. Leonard wasn't the kind of man who demanded attention. He carried himself with a quiet dignity that spoke louder than words ever could. A slight stoop in his shoulders, a stiffness in his right leg, remnants of years spent in places no one in that diner had ever seen. His coat always buttoned neatly. His shoes old but shined. His face lined with time, but his eyes steady, focused, the kind that had watched too much to waste time judging anyone else. Every visit was the same. Table by the window. One scrambled egg, a slice of toast, and a single sausage link. The breakfast special, $4.75. And every week, Leonard paid with coins. Not out of pride, not to make a point, but because that's what he had. Nickels, dimes, quarters carefully rolled and tucked into a worn leather pouch that once held something else, maybe tobacco, maybe metals. Now it held his dignity in clinking silver. People often mistook his method for defiance, thought he was being difficult, but Leonard wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just trying to hold on to routine, to self-respect, to the only thing that hadn't been taken from him over time. His pension barely covered rent. Groceries were a guessing game each month. But that breakfast, that was his treat. His small declaration that he still mattered, that he was still here. And at Shelby's diner, even if the world moved faster than he could now walk, Leonard never missed a Thursday. Never missed a meal. Never missed a chance to show up with what little he had left and offer it with unwavering pride. That Thursday was no different at first. Leonard eased himself into the same corner booth by the window, resting his cane gently against the wall. He nodded politely at the young waitress who'd only started a few weeks ago. She didn't smile back. She never did. His order was routine, his manner the same. But when it came time to pay, he reached once again into his pouch and began counting the familiar coins, setting them gently on the check presenter, just as he had every week before. That's when the air shifted. The waitress picked up the coins with 2 fingers, like they were something filthy. She sighed, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "Seriously," she muttered, eyes rolling. "You're paying in nickels and dimes again." Leonard didn't respond. He simply looked down at his hands, the same hands that had once carried rifles, patched wounds, and held on to friends during darker days. "We're not a coin exchange," she added, her voice sharp now, bouncing off the tiled walls. A few heads turned. Someone chuckled. The manager, standing just a few feet away, didn't move, didn't speak. He looked right through Leonard, like he wasn't even there. More laughter now. One customer elbowed his buddy, whispering something under his breath. Another shook her head with pity, but said nothing. Leonard remained still. His spine straightened almost imperceptibly, not out of defiance, but control. The kind you build over years of enduring what can't be changed. He nodded once quietly and turned to walk back to his booth. The clink of his cane against the floor echoed louder than it should have. His shoes dragged just slightly, betraying the effort it took to keep moving forward. Each step felt like a weight, not just of age, but of memory. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He simply returned to his seat with the kind of grace only a man who has survived worse can carry. But inside, something ached. Not just from the humiliation, but from the silence that allowed it. Back in his booth, Leonard sat in silence, the edges of his eggs already going cold. No one refreshed his coffee. No one asked if he was all right, but he didn't expect they would. That kind of attentiveness had long since vanished from his world. He quietly unfolded a napkin on his lap, as he always did, and began eating with careful precision. Knife in his right hand, fork in his left, elbows in, posture straight. Habits from another life. Habits he'd never unlearned. After a few slow bites, he paused, reaching into the side pocket of his jacket. From it, he pulled a small plastic pill organizer, each compartment labeled with black letters nearly rubbed off. Monday's dose rattled faintly as he opened it, revealing 3 pills. One for the blood pressure, another for the arthritis, and the last, well, the doctors weren't sure if it helped anymore. He took them without water. His coffee had cooled too much to bother. Leonard leaned back, hand brushing against the inside of his worn wallet. He hesitated, then opened it and looked at the photo inside. Faded and curling at the edges, it showed a young woman in a white dress, standing beside a soldier with a square jaw and bright eyes, eyes that no longer shined the same way. He lingered there for a long moment, thumb gently tracing the corner of the photo. Her name was Alma. His whole world once fit in her laugh. But she'd been gone for over a decade now. That left him with memories, medication, and a pension that barely kept up with rent. People saw the coins and thought he was being difficult. But for Leonard, it was survival. A few dollars in change each day meant he could afford breakfast without skipping his medication. It wasn't pride. It wasn't rebellion. It was arithmetic. Yet in that diner full of voices, he was invisible. Just another old man in the corner, holding on to dignity 1 nickel at a time, and no one cared to ask why. Just as Leonard reached for his napkin to wipe his mouth and begin the quiet ritual of standing, paying, and leaving without a fuss, a low voice echoed from the far corner of the diner. "Excuse me." It cut through the soft clinks of silverware and the faint hum of the jukebox. Chairs shifted. Conversations paused. From a booth bathed in sunlight, a tall man in a dark overcoat stood. He moved with quiet authority, measured, purposeful. His short-cropped silver hair, the tight crease in his slacks, the polished boots, there was no mistaking the man's past. You could spot a military bearing from a mile away. He stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. "Is that Sergeant Harold Linwood?" Leonard looked up, confused, surprised. His lips parted, but no words came. The man continued, "You might not remember me, but I remember you." He turned to the waitress, who now stood frozen, lips tight, eyes wary. "I've got his tab, and make sure he gets a fresh meal and hot coffee. I'll also be leaving a tip big enough to make up for the respect that was missing here today." He turned back to Leonard, this time with a softened expression. "Sergeant Linwood, you pulled my squad out of a dead-end alley in Kandahar. We were out of options. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here to raise 3 grandkids." The diner went completely still. "I never forgot your name, and I never forgot what you did." Leonard blinked. His hand trembled slightly around his napkin. A flicker of something returned to his face, faint but undeniable. Recognition. Not of the man's face, but of something deeper, being seen. The tall stranger, Colonel Nathaniel Beckett, reached out his hand. Leonard rose slowly, gripping it firmly. It was a handshake between warriors. One seasoned by time, the other carrying the weight of gratitude. And just like that, everything shifted. Word travels fast in small towns, faster still among those who wear the scars of service. Within half an hour, the doors of Shelby's diner swung open one by one. An older man entered first, moving slowly, with a cane wrapped in faded camouflage tape. He nodded at Leonard with the quiet respect of one who knew the weight behind the ribbons. Then came another, broad-shouldered, in a ball cap stitched with Vietnam veteran. A third followed in a wheelchair, his eyes sharp, his hands steady on the wheels. And then a fourth and a fifth. One by one, they filled the diner. Not with noise, not with bravado, but with presence. Steady, honorable, undeniable. They gathered around Leonard's booth, greeting him like a long-lost brother. Some placed hands on his shoulder. Others offered quiet smiles. It was a silent formation, a rally of dignity. The waitress, who had once looked down her nose, now stepped back into the shadows, overwhelmed by a presence she couldn't command. They shared war stories in short fragments, names of distant places, lost comrades, funny moments only they could understand. The air changed, not heavy with sorrow, but thick with camaraderie. One man raised a mug of coffee and said with a chuckle, "You carried me once, Linwood, right through a minefield in Basra. I still owe you for that, so let me carry this tab." Laughter followed, genuine, unforced. The kind that only comes from men who've seen the worst and still choose to see the good. Leonard didn't say much. He didn't have to. His eyes said it all. Gratitude, disbelief, and the quiet return of something long absent, pride. For the first time in years, he wasn't just seen. He was remembered. By the time the veterans had settled around Leonard, the tone of Shelby's diner had transformed. What once felt cold and indifferent now pulsed with quiet reverence. The clatter of dishes softened. Conversations lowered. Even the regulars who once looked away now watched with new eyes. Eyes that saw a man, not just an old habit. The waitress, who'd earlier rolled her eyes and mocked his payment, stood frozen for a moment by the soda fountain, her face flushed. Then, slowly, she approached Leonard's table, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know. I didn't see you for who you are." Leonard looked up. His gaze was calm, not bitter, not angry. Just tired and wise. "You don't have to know someone's story to treat them with kindness," he said. "You just have to believe they have one." Her eyes welled up. She nodded, and without another word, returned to her station, quieter, humbled, changed. The manager, who had been watching it all from behind the register, cleared his throat and stepped forward. From today on, he announced, voice firm but sincere, "Veterans eat free here. No questions asked. They've paid enough already." The room erupted in soft applause, not loud, not showy. Just sincere like the men who had inspired it. Within days, a new sign was hung over the door of Shelby's diner. Hand-painted, framed in oak. It read, "Hot meals. Open hearts. No one forgotten." And from that moment on, the clink of coins on the counter was no longer met with sighs or stares, but with gratitude. Because sometimes it takes one man's quiet dignity to awaken a whole community's heart. Every morning, a new face appeared. Some wore caps stitched with names of battles long past. Others arrived in wheelchairs or leaned on canes, their medals tucked into jackets worn smooth with time. They came not just for the meals, but for each other. One morning, a little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve as they stood in line. "Mom," he whispered, pointing toward a table of veterans laughing over pancakes, "are they heroes?" His mother knelt beside him, her voice soft but certain. "The real kind," she said. Not long after, a man in his 40s slid into the booth across from Leonard. His eyes were full. "You don't know me," he began, "but my father served with you. He used to talk about how you pulled him out of a blast zone in Kandahar. He said he never would have made a home if not for you." Leonard's eyes misted. No words were exchanged for a long moment, just the kind of silence that holds everything words can't. Shelby's Diner became more than a business. It became a sanctuary, a place where men and women who had once lived in foxholes and silence could now gather without explanation, only shared understanding. One day, when asked why he kept coming back, Leonard said simply, "I paid with what I had. That's what soldiers do." And somehow, those words lingered, long after the plates were cleared, long after the sun set over the diner sign. It was never about the coins. Not the nickels, not the dimes. It was about a man's quiet courage to serve when asked, and his quiet dignity to endure when forgotten. But more than that, it became about something else entirely. The grace to remember, the strength to honor, the choice to see those who once stood so we could sit in peace. Because sometimes the smallest gestures echo the loudest truths. If you believe no one who served should ever be overlooked, if you believe respect is earned and should always be returned, comment respect. Let their stories live on.